So hello there and good morning. I can still see there's a few people dropping on, so I will start to get underway. But I do appreciate there might be a few people who will drop on as we get going. But I appreciate you all giving your time up. So firstly, let me thank you for joining us this morning. I appreciate that it's early, it's a Tuesday, and it's a webinar, right? I think everyone always appreciates you giving up your time to join us today. But I'm hoping that it's going to be something that'll be really interesting to you and something that you'll find really beneficial. So as you all know, today is all around talking about managing Microsoft 365 with CoreView. And we're going to talk about, firstly, I suppose, why Planet IT has chosen to partner with CoreView and kind of the belief that we have in the product. And then once we've done that, I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to actually show you the product and talk to you in sort of some more detail about those use cases and how the product can really help you when it comes to managing your Microsoft 365 estate. And I think he's better placed than I am to talk you through that. So let's start off with some introductions. So first off, many of you will have spoken to me before, and I will have had the pleasure of meeting many of you in person as well. So I'm James Dell. I'm Technical Architecture Director here at Planet IT, and my job today is just to guide you through CoreView, I suppose, and how we see the product and how we're working with the product, and hopefully be able to show you sort of some value you can really get out of your Microsoft 365 estate by leveraging the CoreView product. And I'm really pleased to be joined by Simon Hughes. So Simon, I'll let you introduce yourself rather than stealing your thunder, and then we can test your mics working.
Yeah, thanks, James. That was a good place to start. So yeah, my name's Simon Hughes. I lead the pre-sales solution architecture team here at CoreView. So work with our customers and partners to help them design solutions that are going to work for them and help them solve, a range of different business challenges around the M365 and Entra stack. So looking forward to the session today. Thanks for having me, James.
No, it's great to have you, Simon. I really appreciate your time. First of all, I'm going to start with the obvious thing, which is this is a Teams live session. So during Teams live, you always have the ability to drop in your questions through the Q&A function. Please do that during the session. What I'll do is I'll pick up all of the questions that you all pose to us, and we'll go through them at the end. The questions are submitted, and the team sat in the background, and we'll go through those and make sure that I can tackle them in a logical order, and we'll try and group any similar questions together. So if you do have questions at any point, please drop them in the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we get to as many of them as we can during this session. But it's all about you getting the most out of this, so please do use that where possible. Because it's a Planet event, I always have to cover this slide. I'll probably cover this slide so many times I could probably do it in my sleep now. But it's always good for you who are joining us who maybe have never worked with Planet IT in the past. We always have said we're kind of that one-stop shop for all things IT. Ultimately, we are one team making your IT more efficient. So we do everything from managed IT support all the way through to security solutions, hardware and software procurement, backup and DR. If it's IT, we're here to help. And that's where CoreView comes in, right? It's something that's there to help around a product that most of you will have in place, which is the Microsoft 365 estate. And many of you will be suffering some of the challenges that we will talk through during this session. And we continue to be trusted by a huge number of organizations. And this slide gets longer and longer every time I do these presentations with more and more logos. Eventually, they're going to look like little tiny dots, and I'm not going to be able to cover any of them. But it's great to have so many household names and so many staple local businesses that we work with who are on this list of partners that we work with. So it's a great place to be. I know that for some of you, I suppose the reason you're joining today is because we are running a little competition alongside of this webinar for anyone who has attended, right? So let's get the terms and conditions bit out of the way before we get into the content. So essentially, to be eligible for to be in that prize draw, you need to have attended this webinar to the end. So we're going to take the statistics from people who are there on the last slide on this this event. So if you drop off before then, unfortunately, your name won't be in the draw. And we are actually going to draw the winner of this this giveaway, so either a coffee machine or a smartwatch. That will be drawn at our live event on Thursday. So we're at the Curzon Cinema for a cybersecurity live hack experience. So you can scan the QR code if you're not signed up to come to that event and you'd really like to. And you also can then see us draw that the name out of a hat, as it were. Might not be a hat, might be a bag. I'm not sure on the day when we get to it, but that's something that we'll draw then. So do make sure you stay around to the end if you want to be in with a chance of winning one of those amazing prizes. But let's get to the kind of the meat and potatoes of why we're here today, right? So I wanted to start off by talking about why Planet IT has chosen to work with CoreView. Obviously, there's some products out in the market that maybe do similar things, but we've specifically chosen to work with CoreView. And I suppose the obvious reason for why this all started is Microsoft 365 is complicated. It's becoming one of these ever-growing products that has so many different requirements, so many different admin interfaces, so many different underpinning technologies that have kind of been meshed together and come through from acquisition or from development from Microsoft. And it can be a bit of a minefield, so much so that if you look at the Microsoft training stack now for Microsoft 365, it's huge. And that can mean that all of us who've got other jobs to do can often be blindsided by some of the things that we're expected to manage inside of Microsoft 365. So we do need to simplify that down. Alongside that, Microsoft just doesn't protect your configuration. So much of what you do with Microsoft is built around configuration now. And so, it's that back end of Intune, of the whole tenant configuration itself. Microsoft doesn't protect that. And a lot of other third-party backup tools that many of you will be using to protect your data also don't protect configuration. So it leaves you vulnerable from kind of, if something goes wrong, how do you get back? And I know that Simon will talk a bit more about that later on. Obviously, we also have seen that Copilot adoption is very hard. Many organizations that have jumped in with Copilot feet first as of the launch last year have really struggled to get people to use Copilot properly and to get the adoption, but also to pull the statistics of what's really being used out of Copilot and really make the most of that expensive license. And it can then be what's seen for many as a wasted investment, while it is a hugely powerful tool and product. There's also the underlying problem of we all are human and we all make mistakes, right? So that misconfiguration ultimately can result in data loss inside of your 365 environment. And it's very difficult to come back from that or to work out where you've made mistakes. The other reason that we looked at CoreView as a product that we wanted to work with is, unlike many other products, there is a monthly purchasing option. So most of us will pay for Microsoft 365 on a monthly subscription. So we pay month by month for our usage. But a lot of the management tools that are out there only are available to purchase as one big bulk purchase for 1 year or multiple years up front. Well, CoreView has options for both purchasing it monthly and purchasing it as a agreement, as a 1 year term, which gives us the ability to be flexible and offer some of that kind of flexibility that Microsoft 365 naturally has. And doing all this ultimately shouldn't cost you the earth. We're talking about managing a product that you already spend a lot of money on and draining more value, right, from Microsoft 365, because ultimately, for many of us, it will be one of the biggest spends we have in our organization. So we should get every penny out of that product we can. And I think that that's something for me that was critical when we were looking at CoreView, is a product that will help us extract that value from the underlying Microsoft 365 estate. As I mentioned, though, Microsoft do not make this easy for us, right? So regardless of how big your team is and how many people, it might be just one of you, right, doing security administration, governance and adoption, and admin support, but you're expected inside of Microsoft 365 to be able to manage over 5,000 configurations, over 18 admin portals, and they keep separating things out that were in one portal or moving them around. An ever-evolving API scheme. We had PowerShell to manage 365. We've then moved to this RESTful API, which then obviously is Graph that then keeps growing. There's now 75 admin roles inside of Microsoft 365. And let's be honest, most of you on this call have probably given yourself global admin rights because it's the easiest way to administer 365, but it's certainly not the safest. There's obviously the ability to run 365 in both a hybrid, a multi-tenant, or just a cloud-only approach, giving you very different varieties of the way that you can work with 365, and meaning that two businesses are never really the same, even though you're using the same product. there's lots of third-party Entra ID integrations, and I worked with a client recently where they'd started in the role and they'd looked at their Entra, and inside of their managed applications was over 200 Entra ID authenticated applications, and picking apart what they were doing was very difficult. Ultimately, unless you're like Lewis in my team, PowerShell is complex and it's something that you don't want to sit and spend your entire life in. But it's something that Microsoft, for some applications, for some fixes, require you to just do it in PowerShell. Teams Phone was always one of those systems which until recently didn't have a proper interface. It was, oh, you can do 10% in the interface, 90% is done in PowerShell. And there is over 40 workloads that you need to think about when you're doing it. And ultimately what that results in is kind of low return on investment because you don't get the product you want. It gives you low productivity because it's hard to get people on board. It's hard to give people the right rights. And ultimately you end up with this global admin exposure, which I mentioned, right? People with the wrong configurations, the wrong access, and essentially excessive sharing risk, data being shared with users that you probably shouldn't be sharing with, but it's very difficult to look at where data's been shared and by who, naturally in 365, unless you want to write your own custom queries for that. So that's where CoreView comes in, right? So it's ultimately to kind of continue to cut away those struggles. You know, like we're talking about 36% of people that were queried as part of a report essentially are using global admin rights. 36%, that's huge, right? We don't want to be doing that. As a white paper that I will share after this that shows you those stats. 54% of Microsoft 365 organizations feel that they're not getting good ROI. And I know that even Planet IT, we were guilty for a long time of not getting the right ROI out of our Microsoft 365 licensing. It was something that took us a long time to really go, let's go back to what we should be doing with that and invest more and more time. And you shouldn't have to do that. You should be buying a license and feeling like you're getting the power from it. And mature organizations have 50 steps in their onboarding process. I know we're probably uniquely involved with so many organizations where we're involved with their user onboarding, and we see the number of steps is add this system, add this permission, add this folder, add this. It's so complicated, and if you make one step wrong, it can really change the way that a user feels when they get onboarded. And likewise, the security of your system when you offboard a user. So tying all those pieces together is key, right? And making the most of securing an environment and making sure that we're governing it properly is key. Therefore, that's why you need a product like CoreView. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to hand over to Simon, who's going to talk to you about some of those use cases and some of the ways that CoreView helps solve that. Because rather than me talking to you about the problems, let's look at some of the solutions, right? I think that's the best way to move forward. So Simon, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, James. Let me just take control and we can push on. So great intro there. Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can see the right slide there. So
we can see the slide.
Perfect. So CoreView is a very broad platform. In essence, the sort of three areas we're focused on is the security, administration, and governance of the M365 stack. So essentially, we're pulling lots of data from the M365 environment, and we are flagging that data into very usable, actionable policies that are out of the box. So one of the biggest areas of value that our customers get is straight away, within minutes of installing the solution, they get a really good idea of the health of their tenant, where they should focus, and how they can really start to improve the security posture of their environment and gain operational efficiencies. We're always looking at things from both that security lens and an operational perspective, be that, licensing. James mentioned sort of Copilot adoption, big area of focus for us as well. So if we just sort of push through, and in this slide, I'm not going to sort of point everything out here, but this will give you a flavor of all the different things we can sort of do across the platform. So there's a range of really powerful areas of functionality. And in the session today, we'll delve into three of those key areas. We'll sort of pick on our governance center, which is really how we unify that centralized visibility. We'll take a look at how we take that a step further. So as well as just flagging sort of areas of concern or areas of possible improvement from a security posture or efficiencies perspective, we'll look at our automation engine as well, and look at how, especially for organizations with smaller teams, very few organizations are getting, more people to manage, sort of less users, less devices, less operational workload. So teams are under pressure. So a big part of what we do is around automation, and we'll look at a few specific examples around JML processes, specifically user onboarding and offboarding workflows, and look at sort of how effortless we can make that process. So pushing on. Again, we exist because the M365 space is complex. It's very complex, right? We never really speak to organizations, when we sort of work with them, or our partners like Planet IT sit down with our partners to install the software and run health checks and don't find fairly considerable issues, right? Security gaps, areas of concern, areas of, massive opportunity from an efficiency perspective. So the reality is that, to James's point, at the very least, organizations aren't extracting, a really good return on investment from their M365 purchase. But more so, organizations very commonly aren't leveraging security tools that are already there. So a big part of what we do is to actually look at the security controls in there and make sure that they are enabled, or create policies to make sure that they are automatically enabled, and make sure that people can't break those or misconfigure them, or that if they do, we can really easily revert back from that. So we are scanning the tenant in near real time. So although we do sort of full daily syncs because we're pulling a lot of data from the tenant, we're basically using graph differential syncs. So we're pulling out data from the tenant constantly, minute by minute, to look for changes that have occurred, look for new things, and whether or not our policy should apply, and apply that automation if we've got that in place. Okay, so the key things there are that we're reducing risk, increasing efficiency, and helping you get a much better return on investment from the costs associated with your M365 stack, whether that's licensing, whether that is the security tooling that's in there and making sure that that's enabled. We're helping across the board. Okay, so we will come on to the licensing shortly, but let me actually see if we can get hands-on with the product, and I will just get logged in here. While I've been talking, I've managed to log myself out, so just bear with me a second.
It's always the worst thing, right? Security is great until it happens midway through a webinar, and it's like, I've just logged you out of everything because you were too idle.
Yeah. There we go. Just bear with me a second. So hopefully everyone can now see my screen. So our starting point here is with our configuration manager solution. And configuration manager is great because it addresses a really big problem that is really coming to the fore. And that problem is basically that Microsoft do not make the configurations of your tenant resilient, really, in any way. So Microsoft have a shared responsibility model that basically means they'll guarantee you that if someone gets into your tenant and breaks a bunch of stuff, deletes a bunch of stuff, or if just someone accidentally makes a bunch of changes, they'll get you back into your tenant. But they make no guarantees around what that tenant will look like when they get you back in there. And obviously there are hundreds, thousands of configurations across the tenant that may have taken you weeks, months of very complex configuration to put in place. So obviously most organizations realize that they should be backing up the data within the tenant from a from a SharePoint, OneDrive, Mailbox perspective. Most organizations have that backed up. They're making that data resilient. But what are you going to back that data up into? So aside from things like users, M365 groups, and a couple of odd bits like app registrations, there's no soft delete in the M365 space. If you change something, if you delete something, there's no one you can call at Microsoft and be like, hey, can you recover this thing for me? Right? functionality does not exist. So with Configuration Manager, we can take tenants, as many tenants as you have. It's a multi-tenant solution, and I can set up a backup schedule. And Configuration Manager is going to back up those configurations. Okay, meaning that the first benefit I get is that I can see changes. So if I just select my tenant here, I sync this tenant every day, and I can see when changes occur in my tenant. Okay, so if I just take a look back to, I don't know, like the 25th of March, let's take a look at what changed here since the previous configuration. So I can see that there were some groups that were added. Okay, I can see that there were some members added to that group, and I can see that there were some users added. There were also some Intune configurations that were removed. Okay, so the first thing is we get what we would call drift detection. We can see what's changing by who and when. Okay, and because we're backing up those configurations, I can then undo things. I could undo a configuration that's been deleted. I could roll back a change to a previously known good state. And I can do that really easily. If I just go to our reconcile page here and I select my tenant, okay, I'm going to run a comparison. And in this case, I'm going to run a comparison with my own tenant. Okay, and because I've got the same tenant selected twice here, I can go back and select, in my case, there was something that had changed on the 25th of March. So I'll go back to the 24th. See, I run a number of syncs down where I'm trying to find the right date. We'll go back to the 23rd, just so I've got plenty of stuff to look at. And I'll select all the different workloads, or I could be more specific. And what this is allowing me to do is run a comparison. So what does the configuration look like, or what do the deltas look like in that configuration between today and the historic point in time that I've selected? Okay, so what I'm looking at now is a comparison between the current version of my tenant that I synced at 7 o'clock this morning and the 23rd of March in this case. So on my first column here, I'm seeing new configurations, things that have been added to my tenant since that historic backup. If I don't want these things in here, I could just uncheck them. I could delve into them and see exactly what that configuration is. So I can see there have been users that have added. Those users have then been added as members of different groups. I've had some Intune device configuration profiles added. I've had various different things. So I could undo new configurations. I could remove them because I've now got visibility that those things have been added. And by the way, we can also send out notifications, so you get visibility of that stuff really, really easily. Okay. Conversely, on the next tab, I can then see configurations that did exist in this backup, but no longer exist as of my latest backup today. So on that visibility, you saw that there was some security, Intune security baselines that had been removed. So if these things shouldn't have been removed, I could actually recover these configurations just by selecting them, or I could do that on an individual basis. Okay. And the third thing I'd want to keep an eye on is conflicting things. Okay, conflicting configurations. So configurations that exist in my current version of my tenant and also in my historic version, but a property of that configuration differs in some way. Okay, so here, for example, I've got a conditional access policy. That conditional access policy exists in both versions of my tenant. But if I open that up, I'll be able to see that it's configured differently between now and the backup, right? So in this case, there's been some exclusions added and some conditions. So I could choose which version of that property or the overall configuration I want to take and apply that. Okay. So just to recap on the use cases that we're covering there, guys, we're providing visibility of configuration drift away from a known state. And because we're capturing that configuration as code, we can allow you to recover those configurations. So recover configurations that have been removed maliciously or accidentally. Undo changes and roll those changes back either at the configuration level or at the property level to a known good state. Okay. Or resolve conflicting configurations and make sure that they're synced. So we've just looked at an example there of comparing a tenant to a historic version of itself, but you can also use this to compare any tenants that we're managing. So if you've got multiple tenants, keeping those in sync. If you've got a production tenant and maybe a dev, test, or UAT tenant, keeping those synced as well is a really solid approach to that. Rolling out configurations and building new tenants very, very quickly is also a great use case. that we solve for. So hopefully that gives you a nice little overview of the configuration manager use case. So I'll just stop sharing for a second and jump over to my CoreView lab. Just bear with me a second. The webinar demons are plaguing me this morning. Apologies, guys. Just bear with me.
It wouldn't work in IT if there wasn't technical issues. That's the advantage, right? While you're doing that, Simon, I'm just going to ask one of the questions that's come in.
Sure.
So with the configuration backup, one of the questions that's been asked is there a way to take those backups offline, or are they only kind of stored inside of CoreView? Is there any way to sort of extract them if you wanted to take them and put them onto a USB or onto somewhere else outside of kind of the cloud-based platform, so you had a copy of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. So under the hood, we're storing those configurations as JSON files, but within a Git repository. We happen to use Azure DevOps to do that. So one of the benefits of that is, yes, absolutely, you can just export that repository. So you have effectively a completely offline, separate backup of that you could then recover just by importing that repository. So that's a great question, and yes, that is something that we for organizations that are very concerned. So, for example, we work with some global energy providers for whom sort of resilience, DR, and business continuity planning is absolutely critical, and that is something that they do. Yes.
Awesome, great, thank you for answering that one. So I thought it was kind of perfect to ask that whilst we were looking at the configuration backup side of things.
Yeah, and I am hitting some pretty significant challenges here right now.
Technical issues.
Yeah.
So I'll keep asking you more questions while you do that. The other one of the other questions is someone's asked that they had previously had a trial of CoreView and so they really liked the product, but they struggled with the changes that were being made in the tenants not being updated into CoreView, and asked if that's a general issue or was that just an issue because of the trial version. Looking at the number of syncs that you had in there, I'm assuming that may well have just been a configuration issue that maybe needs looking at. It's not something that's expected, right? It should be changes you make on the tenant should be reflected through into the CoreView platform.
Yeah, so there's two separate parts to that question. If we're talking about the configuration manager solution that we just looked at, we set up a sync schedule, right? So you're in control of how often we sync that configuration data into the solution. By default, if you just turn the schedule on, that runs at 7 a.m. every morning, but you could configure that to run every few minutes. You probably wouldn't want to do that because tenants, a typically sized tenant, let's say for a sort of smallish enterprise organization, might take around 5 to 10 minutes to sync. So a regular sync of sort of 10 minutes would give you super, very close to real-time configuration data there. In the CoreView platform, where real-time data is much more important, the vast majority of data, basically any data that we can pull via graph, we pull through differential syncs, and they occur sort of minute by minute. So the data is pulled in very, very quickly. So if there's been, a challenge there, it's either because there was some kind of configuration issue, or there are some areas of data that Microsoft doesn't yet provide any way of sort of extracting through graph, and therefore we have to wait for things like audit logs to be generated, where we're at the mercy of how frequently Microsoft generate that data.
No worries. You're still having some technical issues?
I am indeed, yeah. So
I'm going to just still presenting back a second. I'm just going to, whilst you try and fix that, I'll just do some shameless plugging whilst you try and fix it.
No,
it's because as anyone that follows me on LinkedIn will have noticed, I'm doing webinars all day today. I don't know, sucker for punishment maybe. So what I thought I'd do is while Simon fixes his technical issues, I'll just talk to you about kind of what we've got upcoming, and I think it's something that some of you that are on this call it may be of value to. So the first one to mention is that we do have a Microsoft 365 product update, which we do quarterly, which is actually at 3 p.m. today. So there's it's another webinar. It's only about 20 minutes, half an hour. It's not long, but it's actually, we take the thousands of changes that Microsoft decide to publish every 10 minutes and consolidate them down into kind of some bite-sized chunks that are maybe more valuable to business and give you some kind of time frame around when it's happening. So we'll drop that that link is there if you wanted to sign up and join that quarterly update. Outside of that, we actually do have an in-person event as well on the 3rd of April. So we, as I mentioned at the start, we do have our live hack experience that's coming to London, and we have actually opened up a few more spaces for that, especially because we knew we were doing this today. So if you did want to come and join us to go through a live hack simulation, then again, follow the link, sign up, secure your place today. And then we've got a continuation of kind of the Microsoft theme as we get into May, where we're doing our in-person workshops, and we're going to be talking about zero trust, or something that Simon already mentioned around conditional access and around those pieces. We'll be talking about that and going into sort of how you should be configuring your tenant and how you should be protecting yourself from risks. And obviously the CoreView piece plays nicely into that. And then obviously the elephant in the room, which is the kind of Windows 10 post-delivery strategy, and kind of what do you do post-October, right? And how do you move an organization forward? I'm speaking to so many people that continue to use Windows 10 as we move into the last 200 days of support. So it's definitely something that's still an issue. And I think we've got a number of interesting ways to move that forward and stay compliant for things like Cyber Essentials, Cyber Essentials Plus. So if you wanted to join any of those things, and there are many more events that we're doing, because that page is massive, I couldn't fit it all on one slide, then please do drop onto that URL, have a little look at what's upcoming and sign up. I say there's lots of stuff going on, and we do those Microsoft updates quarterly. So if you wanted to sign up for the next couple of ones, then please feel free to do so. How's your technical issue going, Simon?
Not great. Looks like we are. There's an auth issue with Microsoft at the moment that's stopping me being able to log into my CoreView lab, which is painful. But what I'm going to do in the meantime is just show a screenshot of our governance center, which will allow me to talk through the main parts of what we are covering today. So let me go ahead and reshare my screen.
Always have a backup plan, right?
Exactly. Yeah. There we go. So hopefully everyone can see my screenshot. So this is the CoreView Governance Center, right? So when you get CoreView, and I know James is going to cover up a little bit later in the presentation how you can really easily get yourself a 14-day free trial of this. But as soon as you get that and you onboard your first tenant or any tenants into the solution, again, multi-tenant solution, you can, if you do have multiple tenants, it's a great way of managing and getting visibility across those multiple tenants. You can see here we have our governance center. So as soon as we run our initial import, typically going to take like, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 minutes to pull in that data initially, you're going to get this kind of visibility of your tenant, right? So we assign an overall tenant grade, but we're doing that, we're pulling through things similar to kind of Microsoft Secure Score, but we're looking at far more indicators of security than Secure Score looks at. And we're also looking at things from an operational perspective, as I mentioned earlier, right? And we divide that up into different playbook areas. So rather than just getting this big tenant score, which is useful, I can then say, okay, well, where is that score coming from? Which areas of my tenant appear to be pretty healthy? Which areas need focus, right? So under security and identity, let's say I've got lots of users with administrative privileges, but don't have strong passwords configured. Or we have lots of users with administrative roles that are logging in outside of conditional access policies. Just to provide a few examples, that's going to impact my security scores. Okay, so how that works is under the hood of each of these, what we call playbook areas, there are policies, and you can configure the thresholds for those. But by default, for example, something like a user logging in outside of a conditional access policy will generate a critical event, and that will then impact that score. Okay, so you can take a look at that and decide, actually, that's something I need to fix, or that is an exception. I'm aware of that and I can park that so it no longer impacts your score. So effectively, you use the governance center to continually drive and improve the health of your tenant. And you can see under my overall tenant grade here, mine's 100% here, which sort of a production tenant wouldn't be, but you can see, I can see the change there. I can actually look at that change over weekly, monthly, quarterly, or annual intervals so that you can see which areas, are you improving? And a lot of our organizations like that, so they can demonstrate back to their businesses the improvements that they're making in their tenant and really objectively measure what those look like. Okay. But also this is looking at things from an efficiency perspective. So from a licensing perspective, there are out-of-the-box policies there. Do you have licenses assigned to inactive users, to guest users? Do you have users with duplicated plans? Really easy opportunities to recover that licensing, reuse it elsewhere, and really optimize that spend with Microsoft. We do that with Visio licensing. We do that with a range of other places. James mentioned Copilot adoption. We've got a specific playbook area that covers Copilot, and we look at that from two perspectives. One is Copilot readiness. The Copilot problem really brings to the fore a problem that is there already, but it will make it much more apparent and really much riskier. So when you enable Copilot for users, that is going to make any files that user has access to accessible to Copilot, right? So it's not a new problem. If users already have access to files that they probably shouldn't have access or don't need access to, that's a problem that you've got today. But with the benefit of Copilot, if I were to start asking questions like, from all of the data that you've got access to environment, can you tell me what my colleagues' salaries are? Or can you find me any documents that you would not expect me to have access to as insert job title here? Copilot's going to go and find that stuff. So we have out of the box policies that will go and look for SharePoint sites with very generous sharing settings. Same for Teams, OneDrive areas, things like that. Things that I might want to look at and lock down before I go ahead and enable Copilot. So lots of policies that will make me much more comfortable in my journey to enabling Copilot. And then if we have enabled Copilot, we look at that from a utilization perspective as well. So of the users who are eligible for Copilot, are they using it? How often are they using it? Do I need to target that group of users for some more enablement? Or do I potentially just need to recover those licenses? Okay. So this governance center, by the way, when we move on to our licensing model, our entry level licensing gives you this. It gives you that visibility. So you know where you're at and where you might want to go and spend time to resolve issues. If you want to take that a step further though, we have a range of out of the box remediation options as well that you can turn on, right? So that when you spot something, we'll actually help you automatically fix it. I'll give you an example. Under Exchange, one of our Exchange security policies in there is show me any mailboxes that have auditing disabled. Really risky thing, right? Like if I've got access to a user's mailbox, one of the first things I might look to do is disable auditing. So no one knows what I'm going to do from that point. So we'll automatically flag anytime we see that. Great. And with the governance center, you'll automatically get visibility of that. And that would flag as a critical event against that policy. But if you enable the out of the box remediation, we'll notify you that and give operators within the solution at a single click the ability to turn that back on. You could very easily swap out the request to the CoreView operator to the owner of the mailbox, or to the owner of the mailbox's manager, because we could pull that from the associated attribute for that user. So there are a range of out the box remediations that we can apply. Okay. And the beauty there is you can build those remediations very easily. It's very extensible because we have a vast array of out the box management actions that you can just drop in to these automated workflows. We can extend that through the use of Graph and PowerShell. But to James's earlier point, unless you have a large team of folks that are, super comfortable building out scripts all day, you don't want to spend your time doing that. So you can build very, very powerful workflows, right from remediations to our policies here, or into user onboarding and offboarding workflows where we are, doing things like performing in-tune wipes of users' devices, changing mailboxes to shared mailboxes and assigning ownership to managers, all the things, de-assigning licenses, all the things that you want to have solid governance around in terms of what happens when a user leaves your organization. You build that into an automated workflow. Those workflows can then just be triggered from one of our policies when we see a new user, or you can trigger those policies manually, the workflows manually, or you can even trigger them from trigger the workflows through our API. So if you had a HR system or an IGA solution that you wanted to then use to trigger a very, powerful workflow within CoreView that you can build and maintain really easily because it's no code, then that becomes a very powerful thing to do. Okay, so apologies, couldn't dive into the solution today, guys. I've hit a number of technical hiccups, but hopefully there you can see exactly what we're doing with that governance center and some of the value that we're bringing there through that unified visibility and the automation. So thanks for that, James. Back over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up that licensing slide. I think that's the key piece here, because there's also a question we've been asked around licensing. So I think we can.
Sure.
Two birds in one stone if the sharing works. Here we go. Let's wait for it to pull my right slide up. It's gone too far forward. Here we go. Right. So I'm going to jump straight into the question around licensing so that we can tackle it off the same time. So the question was, how does CoreView define a user? So is that everyone with like a business premium license or a business standard license, or is that anyone that's inside the tent? How is that defined from a licensing point of view from CoreView?
It's any licensed object and any license whatsoever. Okay, so if the object, so typically that's going to be users, right? But mailboxes, anything else that can have a license assigned, if it has a license assigned, that would count as a licensed user from a CoreView perspective.
That makes it nice and easy. From a licensing overview point of view, as you mentioned, you kind of have that essentials package, right? That kind of gives you the full visibility that you were talking about and ticks all those boxes. And then the difference between the essentials and the professional really is that kind of task automation out the box kind of actions, right? That's the difference, and that's the way that I see it. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's the being able to see it, and it's the being able to see it and then do a load of things automatically out the box, right? That's the two differences that I really see between essential professionals, if I'm hitting that correctly.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the big ticket difference between the essentials and pro.
And I'm going to sound like the worst salesperson in the world here, but if for most people that I've been speaking to, the truth is start with essentials, look at the visibility, because that kind of opens your eyes up to maybe what's possible. And obviously with Planet IT, there's always the option to go from essentials to professionals down the road, but it can be quite a daunting task to jump into a product like this and go, right, let's see all this data and then let's take that straight away to take an action. Because I suppose I can speak from experience, a number of the people we've onboarded already, when you do that initial tenant review, especially people who are like, yeah, secure score's great, I've got everything nailed. The data gets pulled into CoreView and the score isn't anywhere near what they were expecting. And I think it takes a little bit of time to digest that and work about the way you want to move forward and kind of really solve those kind of security and governance controls inside of your environment before you think about how you automate the next step, right, in terms of making sure that new users and old users get taken off correctly and all those kind of fun things. In terms of, I suppose, how we get this moving, right? I think Simon mentioned earlier, we've got a very unique offering, right, with this. So if you are joining this call today and you're like, I want to see what CoreView can do, first of all, it's super simple to get that up and running. From our point of view, you can literally get a 14-day free trial. We can get that set up today. All you have to do is email architecture@planet-it.net, which goes straight to my team, and my team will essentially set you up on the platform, or reach out to your Planet IT account manager, or you can ring our main number and speak to your account manager if you don't know who that is. And we will literally send you an email that basically has a link that you follow that will set you up an account, integrate you into the CoreView platform, and given a few hours for the data to ingest, you will then be given full access to go and do everything that Simon's just talked about, right? And look through that. What I would say is that when you do these trials, the best thing you can do is ask the person who sets it up. So from my team, normally one of my architects, is to have a follow-up call about 10 days in to go over the platform and how you're getting on with it and show you some value adds and some other things you can do, because I know from doing all this, it can be quite intense, right? We talk about all the management interfaces that Microsoft has. Well, we're taking away all that complexity and putting it into single pane of glass, which sometimes can be quite overwhelming. But you can really get some good value out of this, and you can get some really good value out of just the trial alone. That's the level of detail that CoreView provides you. It's not like a trial that some other products offer where it's kind of like 10% of the product. You really do have access to just crack on and do what you want to do. And then if you wanted to go from the trial to production, you don't actually have to do anything. You can continue that on, and we can just work out the licensing count and all those pieces, and we'll do that before that 14-day free trial runs out. So yeah, definitely do reach out today if you think it's something that would be of benefit to you and that you've liked what you've seen. And if you feel that you want to get a bit more information about it, then do feel free to reach out via that email address as well. I'm going to rattle through. There's loads of questions coming, so I'm going to try and answer them all, or ask them all, sorry, Simon, and then you can answer them because that's much easier. So the first one I've got on my list is under the professional license, what would be the definition of custom policies? Is this something that wasn't created using one of CoreView's templates, or is there a different way that's defined?
Yeah, so it's so custom policies are policies other than the out of the box policies. So under each of those sort of tiles that I showed you previously, there are a range of out of the box policies. There's close to 100 out of the box policies. If you want to build your own, so you get access to the full reporting suite where you can then apply filtering to any of our reports from Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Entra, active users, inactive users, and create a policy that dictates what you want to have happen in a given scenario, or I'm interested in this scenario. You can create those custom policies. So the custom policies are anything that you want to build on top of the out of the box policies, which you'll get with Pro.
Awesome. So the next question, I think, is a nice and easy one, which is there a minimum license count for the use of the product?
There is not. No.
I think nice, easy. Well, there's always one easy question. That's what we like, right? So yeah, genuinely, if you are a one user business or you're a 10,000 user business, there's no minimum license count. The only thing I will say from a commercial point of view, from a Planet point of view, is that there is a point where if you are a large enough organization that the monthly option might not be the right solution for you, it might be better to look at some of the bundled options. But that's what our team is there to help you through with. Doesn't stop you doing the trial. Do the trial, see what you feel, see how you like it, and then we'll look at the best licensing option for you before that 14 days runs out. But that's the only thing that I would say. There's no minimum count, but it's definitely something to be aware of. Next question. So this person's looking to get their ISO 27001 certification for their organization. Would CoreView help with meeting those requirements? I like putting you on the spot, Simon, giving you really difficult questions now.
Yeah, no worries. Something we get asked all the time. So the short answer is yes, absolutely, and in both sides of the product, right? We looked at the configuration manager solution, we looked at the CoreView solution in the governance center. So on the configuration management side, there's definitely an ability with that to help demonstrate certain criteria within ISO 27001. So things like change control processes. How am I making sure that I am applying rigorous, change control processes, or resilience and recovery options around solutions is key, and something that a lot of our customers demonstrate using the configuration manager solution. Inside CoreView as well, we can very easily work with you to build specific playbooks within our governance center that really map to ISO 27K controls or any other framework controls, right? So if there are policies that you want to get visibility of that relate to mappings that you want to achieve, then absolutely you can build those out and then get not just visibility for yourself, but especially from like an audit perspective, we can really open that up and use our role-based access control to give auditors visibility into those controls that you've put in place through the CoreView solution as well. Yeah, absolutely. Also on the configuration manager side, we do have an out-of-the-box industry baseline for CIS configurations. So an ability to compare any tenant against CIS controls. Obviously not ISO 27K, but very relevant to sort of other industry
Very
standards.
similar, yeah.
Exactly. So it's something we take very seriously, and we do intend to add other sort of compliance framework mappings into the solution later this year as well. Certainly NIST is something that's on our radar as well.
Awesome. I've got another question around Entra ID and around kind of the management. So the question sort of asks, is CoreView something that takes care of the kind of management of Entra ID and kind of pulls the data from it? And I suppose it's I've asked that question a bit backwards, but I hope you understand where I'm coming from in terms of the integration with Entra ID and CoreView and the level of data, those pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one of the use cases that we've not explored today, we just sort of cherry picked a few to discuss on this webinar, is that single pane of glass, right? So as an administrator of the M365 space or Entra, I've got to navigate around multiple management portals and then multiple sort of blades within those portals. Within CoreView, for example, if I go to a report, if I go to the active users report and I select that report, I'm then presented with a range of out-of-the-box tasks. So from things like managing that user's mailbox to moving that user between groups to managing that user's device through Intune, all of those actions are just presented to me. The really powerful thing is with our role-based access control, it is task-based. Okay, so it's far more granular than anything I can achieve natively in Microsoft with like PIM roles or anything like that. So a lot of our customers find that the ability to assign specific tasks to users is really powerful, because we can then extend that with workflows as well. So let's say I've got very complex processes that are even potentially scripted, and I don't want to give those tasks to sort of junior resources within my organization because they could potentially, manipulate scripts, change them, whatever, or just get stuff wrong. I can process those actions into a workflow and then give those users the ability to trigger that workflow, meaning that they can just run it. They can't change it or get stuff wrong. So yes, the very short answer to your question was we are absolutely simplifying the management of users and other objects within Entra through the solution as well.
Cool. I'll give you a breather for a second because there's a question I'm just going to answer. So a couple of people are asking questions around licensing and licensing costs. The first thing I'll say is I'm 100% not a salesperson. This is very much a technical session. So what I can say is it's not expensive. And what if you want to get pricing, what we can do is if you reach out to the account management team or you email that architecture mailbox and just say you want pricing, we'll share that directly because I don't want to get it wrong. And there's a number of different SKUs and different options around terms. But we can share all that. It's not trying to hide it. The reason that we like this is it is very cost effective. I just don't want to give out the wrong thing because I'm, say, not a salesperson. I don't want to be a salesperson. It sounds really bad. I just want to talk to you about products. But we definitely can help you with that pricing and share that. We're completely transparent with how that works. The next question for you, Simon, I suppose, is how does CoreView work with the B2C users in Entra ID and customer logins? I'm assuming there's two parts to that question. Is what data can we see inside of the CoreView platform, and then I suppose does that affect the licensing?
So depends partly on the question. So we see all users within Entra. We are the sort of unique identifier we use for users is UPN. My understanding is that with B2C users don't really get a UPN, so they wouldn't be they wouldn't be sort of counted from a license perspective. So that wouldn't be something you'd need to worry about if you've effectively got a bunch of B2C users in there. They wouldn't count towards our licensing costs.
Awesome. I thought that'd be the case. I think it's one of those things where B2C is a weird one, isn't it? Because Microsoft don't really integrate them into the tenant, but you definitely get the security visibility of what they can see. And I suppose for someone who's specifically a big B2C user, let's get the trial set up and let's start diving into what data you can see, right? That's probably the best way to look at it and see if it helps you overcome those challenges, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. The questions coming in so fast. I'm trying to click the button. It keeps refreshing. So next question is this customer is using 365 Business Standard. I know that the other products I know there are other products you need to have Business Premium or further visibility, but is CoreView limited by having a user with a lesser license? I suppose that's quite a good question. If Microsoft are very good at locking out some of the security features and visibility behind Business Premium and Entra P2 and things, but if you're a business that doesn't have that, uses Business Standard, Business Basic, is CoreView limited by the visibility of the user license, or is it what data you can get from Graph?
Yeah, so at a minimum, you would need Business Premium, I think. I think as an initial starting point. To your point, there are just features that are not enabled that we need to be able to use to integrate with the tenant. If you've not got that in place, but yeah, I think it's Business Premium is the minimum licensing that you'd need in the tenant.
Is that and I'm going to ask the question, and I know it's on a recorded webinar, so I'm assuming that's similar to some of the other Microsoft features where once you've got the license, it opens up the API to pull that data in. It doesn't necessarily need to be assigned to every user. Yeah. So to answer the question specifically about licensing, it might be a case that if you've got an entire tenant of Business Standard and Business Basic, it would make value to add one Business Premium license, and then you can integrate that data and put it through. But from a non-CoreView point of view, there's a huge delta between Business Standard and Business Premium in terms of the features, and I'd always would recommend organizations look at Business Premium where possible, because Business Standard doesn't really tick a lot of those boxes these days. It's very much an entry product, unfortunately, hence the standard naming. I've got one more question, I think, before I know we're over anyway, which is, does CoreView integrate with any other tools and platforms? The specifically one I suppose we haven't mentioned, it would be the kind of on-premise environment, wouldn't it, in terms of if you've got a hybrid setup. But is there anything else that CoreView integrates with that you pull data in from?
Yes, it's a really good. So the first sort of point on sort of integration is that one of the areas we're really powerful around is hybrid environments, right? So a lot of organizations out there are still in some kind of hybrid state where they're using on-prem AD alongside Entra, and possibly even still on-prem Exchange, less so as Microsoft look to deprecate it. But yeah, so if we have our hybrid connector in place, we can also be pulling reporting data and applying management actions into both that cloud and on-prem world. We've got an out-of-the-box integration with ServiceNow from an ITSM perspective. So, for example, if we wanted to trigger a workflow from a ServiceNow incident, we can do that, and we can then update that incident bidirectionally. But really, there's a broad scope for sort of inbound and outbound integration points. So CoreView itself has a robust public API. So there are various things that I can trigger, like our workflows. We can apply virtual tenant segmentation, which is yet another very powerful use case that we've not had a chance to discuss today, but I can create virtual tenants through the API, modify them, remove them, trigger workflows, various things I can do with our API. Within our workflows, though, we can natively call Graph and PowerShell scripts as well. So, for example, if I wanted to go and create a ticket into any ITSM tool, as long as that ITSM tool has an API or some PowerShell integration, then we can a lot of opportunities for extensibility.
And that's what a lot of our clients are doing, right? So, if they're using ServiceNow or anything else, is with a bit of design, you can pull the data out of CoreView, the alerts, and you can push them into your help desk or your service desk for your team to action, right? So as compliance or governance problems come up, that there's a job for people to follow up on, and that's kind of your entry point to making the most of this product. First of all, I suppose, Simon, thank you very much for taking all those questions. I kind of have hit you with a barrage of questions over the last few minutes.
No worries.
If there's anything that I didn't manage to get back to in terms of questions that's come through on the chat, I will send. We always do we'll put the video and any questions and answers onto the Planet website in a blog article, so you can do that. Obviously, anything more specific, feel free to reach out to the sales team, our account managers. They are there to help, or email myself with the email address on the screen, or Architecture at Planet. We're all here to help. If you want to get a trial set up, reach out to myself or Architecture Today. We can get the trial up and running for you, and we can give you the ability to see for yourself the value that the product has. That, I know we're over a little bit, but that does bring us to the end of the webinar. It goes without saying, I'm really grateful for everyone giving up their time today to sit and attend and listen to what we had to say and look at CoreView as a product. I'm really thankful, Simon, as well, for you giving up your time and joining us to go over it. I think it's been really useful, and we'll blame Microsoft for all the technical issues because that's what we're good at. But outside of that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and thank you very much. And I'll see you, potentially some of you, in a few hours when I do my next webinar. But until then, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks very much, all. Have a great day.